Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. We're gonna get started. Actually, we're gonna just give it 1 minute since people are still joining, so we're just gonna give everyone a second to get settled. Okay, awesome. We're gonna get started now. As I already said, thank you guys so much for coming. I know it's kind of a funky time, but we're super glad to have you. This is gonna be the continuing the internship search presentation. It's super informal and really supposed to be informative and helpful for y'all. So if you have questions at any point in time, feel free to stop me or Jess or drop your questions in the chat, or you can also put them directly in like the direct messages to us if you'd prefer that instead. So like feel free to stop us at any point in time. Like it's really supposed to be helpful for you guys. So whatever we can do to make this as beneficial for you guys as possible. Before we like get started with all of the content, we just wanted to start with a little bit of a disclaimer. I know that everyone is attending the session because they're looking for internships for this summer right now, and we just wanted to let you guys know that there's still tons of time. New positions are opening every day, so continue applying, keep at it, even though I know this process is difficult and stressful. You really just need one thing to work out, and we believe in you, and we're here to help you guys. So we just wanted to do introductions first. So my name is Lila. I am a junior here at USC. I am a public policy major on the environmental policy and sustainable development track. I have minors in legal studies and criminality and forensics, and I'm currently a Hayes Barnard Fellow in sustainability through USC Marshall. Um, on campus activities, I'm part of USC Hellenes, the Student Sustainability Committee, Spark SC Activist Incubator, and the USC Career Center as an intern, which is why I'm here giving this presentation today. A little bit about my work experience, my internship history. I worked at a restaurant in my hometown all throughout high school. I was an intern at Chicago Fair Trade my junior and senior year of high school. They're an environmental and economic justice focused like nonprofit that's super awesome. Last year, I worked at the USC Peace Garden, and then last summer, which is like arguably my biggest internship experience, I was a congressional intern for U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth, and then I'm also working currently right now at the Career Center. And I'm going to let Jess introduce herself.
Hi guys, I'm Jess. I'm a senior here at USC studying communication and I'm minoring in cinematic arts. And within USC, I work with the Daily Trojan. I write on the entertainment section. Also, if you guys are unmuted, please mute yourselves. Thank you. Yeah, Lila, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah. So this is some of my work experience. I've had a good variety of roles within entertainment, communication, and media. Currently, I'm working at the Lee Andrews Group, which is a public policy PR firm here in Los Angeles. I also work at the Career Center, as the industry insider for communication, entertainment, and media. And then over the summer, I worked at Abrams Books on the publicity team, working with children's books specifically. Diary of a Wimpy Kid might be one that you recognize. And then I worked at Distal Godrich and Brett, which is a literary agency where I was doing coverage and writing editorial letters for the novels that they work on. Then prior to that, I worked at David Arkin Consulting as a summer intern, where I was mostly doing news and media consulting content for news organizations down south. And then lastly, my first ever internship was with Dolphin Entertainment, where I was a production intern doing script coverage and helping with casting.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. Um, so just to get started, a little brief kind of outline of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to cover where to find internships, application strategies, networking, the interview process, and then resources USC offers. At the end, we'll have a big like Q&A portion. But feel free to ask questions all throughout if you have any questions about anything we're saying. Also, if there's anything you're interested in that we're not covering today, or we don't mention, like feel free to bring that up as well. We're super happy to talk about anything, and your question will probably be beneficial for other people listening as well.
So, to start off, we're going to talk about where you can find these internships. And Handshake and LinkedIn are definitely two of the top ones, especially considering that Handshake posts are mostly specifically geared towards USC students, and these employers are looking to hire you guys. Additionally, Indeed, Idealist, USA Jobs, career fairs, and faculty connections are also great opportunities to find open positions and just kind of explore the different fields that you're interested in pursuing.
Definitely. And then every different field will have sort of a different job where that's more or less geared to them. So like there'll be some specifically for different industries, and you just have to look that up. But Handshake and LinkedIn are the two, and Indeed, I think, are kind of the three like central ones. So we're gonna go through Handshake and LinkedIn really quick in depth. But if you have any questions about any of the other ones, feel free to ask that as well. So first off, this is just kind of like a little how-to on Handshake. Um, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, you have an account through USC. You should log in. You should be making the most of that. It's a great program, amazing platform. This is just the little sidebar that comes up when you log into your Handshake account. The most important ones I'm going to highlight. So your inbox is where employers and recruiters can message you directly if they're having an event on campus or they have an open position that matches like the major and minor that you've inputted into your Handshake profile. They can message you directly to let you know about specific opportunities. And then below that is the jobs tab. So that's where you view all available jobs, internships, fellowships, anything and everything. Right below jobs is events. So that's where recruiter events at USC, networking events at USC, career center events at USC would be. So, for example, you found this through that platform. And then people is where you can see all of the like students and alumni at USC that are on there. It's a great way to get into contact with alumni and see who's worked at jobs you're interested in. The same thing for employers. That's just employers at different jobs or organizations you might be interested in. And then finally, Career Center. So that's the Career Center page, and that has all of the specific resources and things that the Career Center offers specifically for USC students.
Yeah, so as you can see, this is what the Handshake like job board would look like. And Handshake is great because you can filter out the different postings that you're seeing through location, the different USC collections. Each school has their own, what type of position, etc. And then you can also click the Notify Me toggle, which will then send you emails about jobs that are similar to the ones that you're interested in. So you just stay up to date on all of the postings and make sure that you're not missing anything.
Yes, that is an awesome feature. And then this is an example of what those notifications would look like. So I have them set for like a bajillion things right now, basically. But they're really helpful, and you get them, you can set them as emails or messages in Handshake, just depending on how frequently you're on Handshake.
Additionally, on Handshake, you can kind of see the details of each job position and if you're necessarily qualified for it as well. As you can see on the screen, they're looking for a junior who's a public administration major, public policy major. So Handshake will automatically match you and show that you're qualified for, or maybe not necessarily qualified for. Additionally, it shows similar jobs and other opportunities that you could explore within the same kind of field.
The similar jobs thing is one of my favorite things. If you find a job that you're super interested in applying to, if you just scroll down to the bottom of the posting, they'll have a list of usually like 4 to 5 jobs that are similar to it that you might also be interested in. So it's a good way to kind of expand the number of jobs and internships you're applying for. Okay, so off of Handshake and onto LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is really underused for finding jobs. I think it's super utilized for networking and for that kind of thing. But they actually have an amazing job board on there that has really good filters and stuff like that. So this is just an example of that, but they have all the filters at the top. So what type of job it is, like date posted experience they're looking for, if it's remote, hybrid, in person, whatever mix of that there is. And then LinkedIn sends you like top job picks for you based on other jobs that you've been interested in or other jobs you've applied for. So it's a really good way to continue seeing like a pretty steady stream of new jobs you're applying for that you can apply for kind of on a weekly basis.
LinkedIn is also a great space because you can easy apply through a lot of jobs, which is where you upload your resume to your LinkedIn account, and it's just kind of like a one-click process, which is really great, especially when you're trying to mass apply to a bunch of different potential opportunities. So as you can see on this slide, we talk about different application strategies. So it's really important, first and foremost, to understand the deadlines and apply early when possible. So even though you may see that a job, the deadline isn't until a month away, it's really important to get your application in as soon as possible because sometimes if they receive or if they're inundated with applications at the beginning, these employers will kind of just place a cutoff and only examine the first however many applicants. So you want to be part of that smaller pool. It's also really important to tailor your resume and your cover letter to the job description by utilizing the keywords and experiences that they're looking for. Using like storytelling, enthusiasm, and making sure that you're aligning with their mission really helps when crafting a compelling cover letter and one that, whether it's a AI model or if it's an actual HR manager that's reading your cover letter, you're hitting all of the key points that they're looking for. And in terms of keeping all of this in track, it's really important to keep everything organized, whether that's through spreadsheets, trackers, your notes app, whatever is most comfortable for you. It's important to note kind of when you're applying and what you're applying for to make sure that you're just on track with everything and not missing anything.
And then we're going to cover all of these sections a little bit more in depth in the next coming slides. So just don't feel too overwhelmed right now. So this is just an example. We wanted to go over cover letters and resumes and just kind of like how to's for those really quick. Obviously, like we know it's really tiring to have to keep writing and keep editing resumes and cover letters, like as you apply to more jobs. Like we totally get the frustration. Like we've been there, we've been in your shoes. Like it's a frustrating process, but it is really important to be putting your best foot forward when you're applying to jobs and when you're applying to internships. This is kind of the standard template that we use for resumes. So you want to have your name and your information at the top. Our kind of rule of thumb is that while you're still in school, education should be the first sort of category and like subsection you have on your resume, just because like that's who you are right now. You're a student. You want to be able to put your GPA, where you go to school, anything applicable, any like scholarships or fellowships that you partake in while you're at school. And then below your resume, you want to have your work experience. It should be in chronological order, and whatever you're currently doing should be the top. For those bullet points, you want to make sure they're action oriented, number oriented, and like very summative and not like full of filler words or anything like that. And then after work experience, if you so choose, you can put leadership or involvement if you're involved in clubs on campus or if you do a lot of volunteering work or anything like that. It's a good idea to put it on there. And then at the very bottom, skills, certificates, if you have anything, if you're bilingual or if you have specific coding skills. And then I know Jess has a fun fact on her resume. That's really up to you if you want that. But I know a lot of people like that. So totally up to you. You don't have to follow a specific like hard format for a resume. You can totally make it your own. But this is kind of like our recommended format. And then the other thing for resumes is just like don't really put any pictures. You only have a page to get across this information. And so you want to make sure you do the most of it. You want to cut down on white space as much as possible, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's really important to consider when you're creating a resume what you're applying for because, a cover letter for computer science versus for public relations is going to look really different. So, the template is kind of just a great starting point. And like Lila mentioned, it's important to make sure that you don't have any small errors. Remove any photos or graphics. Again, this will differ, if you're in a graphic design field, your resume will probably look a little bit different than what the traditional resume is. But in general, you want to stick to having your contact information at the top, your education and your schooling, awards, and making sure that you're using quantifiable details in all of your bullet points. Yeah, keeping short and concise and omitting any roles that don't directly relate to the position that you're applying for, ensuring that you're tailoring all of your content to the exact position and the company.
Yeah, my biggest recommendation, especially if you have a lot of experience, is to sort of keep just like a running document as your resume. So right now, my like normal resume is about a page and a half. And then depending on what the position I'm applying for is, I'll take certain stuff off of there in order to be able to highlight other things. So it just really depends on like the job description and what the job would entail itself. My resume is kind of different for every job posting I'm applying to.
Yeah, and like we mentioned earlier, I enjoy having a fun fact at the bottom of mine where I highlight things that are not traditionally on a resume, such as I like to play volleyball, I'm a live music enthusiast, and I'm a book talk user. Stuff that is directly geared towards the stuff that I'm applying for. And of course, it's not exactly what you would put on your resumes, but maybe thinking of that as well, because there is going to be a human at some point, whether, it's in the very first round or near towards the end once there's no more AI that's involved in it, but there will be a human looking at your resume at some point, and I think making your personality come off from the paper is important because you are not just a number, you're not just a name, you are a human with real character traits.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a huge part of writing resumes and cover letters, especially cover letters, which we're now getting to. They're really a chance to show kind of the person behind the resume. You really don't want your cover letter to just be like a regurgitation of your resume. They already have that, they've already read that. Your cover letter should address more about why you want this role, why you think you're a good fit for this role, and what makes you unique and what makes you a great fit for their company. So we're just going to go over quickly like steps to writing a cover letter. I know that it's kind of a point of confusion for a lot of people, but a cover letter should only be one page. You should address your letter professionally. So if you have the contact information of the hiring manager, sometimes that will be put in the job description. So make sure to read that thoroughly. If you don't, you can always put Dear Hiring Manager. But you want contact information in the top left of the page. So you'll have like company name, position, and date, and then the professional greeting. So dear hiring manager or dear whatever name it is. And then we have an example of that professional greeting in like two slides. So don't feel too stressed about understanding that right now. After you have that formal greeting, you want to use the first paragraph to introduce yourself and express your interest in the position and whatever the company or organization is. That should be your first paragraph. So you want to say something like, my name is X, Y, and Z, and I'm writing to express my interest in whatever position and with whatever company. And then you want to explain why you're excited about the position and why you're uniquely qualified for it.
The second and third paragraphs are your space to show all of your skills and your experiences. Traditionally, I like to use the second paragraph to talk about my internship experience, but more in a professional sense. And then I use that third paragraph to tie back in anything I've done at school or, more traditionally. And then, of course, you want to end your cover letter with a specific thank you, ensuring them that, this is what you want to do. You're grateful for their time. Yeah, and just keeping it kind of professional and concise.
And then another thing to keep in mind is that sometimes in job descriptions or in like the application form for a job, they'll ask you to answer specific questions in the cover letter. So you really want to make sure you're keeping an eye out for that because you don't want to just be writing a general cover letter and then you'll be totally missing that. Like a lot of times it'll be like, sometimes it'll be as simple as like, why are you interested in this role and like, why are you qualified for this role? But you really want to make sure you're hitting those marks if they're asking you that question specifically in the cover letter. And then this is just kind of a general format cover letter that we typed out. Obviously, it's pretty unspecific, but that's because it's for no job really. But the top left hand is just kind of that formal greeting that we were saying earlier, your name, your address, phone number, email address. I actually don't put my full address anymore. I just put like Los Angeles, California, and then my zip code sometimes. And then if you need more space, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll put instead of like putting like a line between each of those things, I'll just put like the little I don't know what that's called when I'm thinking about it, the little like straight line. So it'll be like name, straight line, Los Angeles, California, straight line, phone number, straight line. And I'll also put my LinkedIn like link in there. And then you want to put the date and then the company name and then the position you're applying for. And then, yeah, as I said before, dear hiring manager, if you know their name, put their name. And then this just is kind of a rough format of what those three paragraphs would look like. And then you want to have sincerely, best, look forward to hearing from you, and then your name. Also, before we move on to networking, I know that we're kind of rattling through a lot of information. Obviously, it's like supposed to be a very comprehensive presentation since it's supposed to cover a lot of stuff about the internship process. So if anyone has any questions, like we're just going to take a second to pause. Feel free to type them in the chat or message us directly. We just want to kind of give you guys a breather before we dive into the next couple of topics. Okay, I just got a question. They asked, what are our thoughts on using AI for writing cover letters?
My first instinct is to say no. Um, I think that, especially considering now that there is AI involved in the process, there's definitely AI screeners as well. And I think if you submit a cover letter that's been created with the use of AI, an employer will be able to pick up on that and can immediately reject you based on that. So if you need help with like small wording or keeping it more concise, I think that's areas that you can use AI. But in terms of the actual crafting and the writing of it, I would stray away from it just because you don't know exactly how they're screening your cover letters. And of course, AI is not a real person. You want your cover letter to sound like you and to convey, like I mentioned, the person behind the applications. And I think AI kind of takes away from that. Lila, do you have any additional opinions?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's definitely a great tool, and so I think there are uses for it in this process. However, I just think you need to be super careful with how you use it. I think that it's one thing, like I think good ways to use it are if you like need help generating ideas or like you're kind of like stuck. Like I think you can be like, help me think of an idea to write, but then you should write it on your own. You shouldn't be just like you should never copy and paste directly from AI into a cover letter. Like that will get you flagged. But I think using it to
Excuse me?
generate ideas.
And borrowed it. Like I let him borrow a tie. I hope he didn't like wear it out.
Sorry.
Like why'd you let him borrow for what? For composite.
Okay. What was I saying? Yeah, so I think that if you're using it to like generate ideas or help you come up with things to write, as long as you're not like quoting it directly or just like copying and pasting it, I think it definitely can be useful. I also think that a way that I'll use it sometimes is if I've written my cover letter and I want to make sure it meets all the things the job description was talking about, you can put your cover letter into like an AI device and be like, hey, is there anything I'm missing from this job description or anything I should add or anything that like there's a glaring hole in this? And I think that those are ways you can use AI. I just think, yeah, you want to be really careful not to be just like copying and pasting cover letters directly, if that makes sense. I have another question in the chat. Also, if we don't answer your question fully, you have follow-up questions, like feel free to keep messaging. Is it better to be personable or showcasing professional skills?
I think that there's a way of balancing both. I think you don't want your cover letter to just be a regurgitation of your resume. You want it to be able to add on to it and show that, personable aspect of you by elaborating on things that your resume doesn't necessarily highlight, and also showing things that are not on your resume as well that are tailored more to the position. So I think there is kind of that in between of being both professional and personable.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a hard line to walk, especially when you don't have tons of space. But I think you really want to make sure you're doing both as much as possible. Which I know is like kind of a cheat answer, but I think you just want to make sure you're highlighting your professional skills while also making it sound like an authentic, excited person. I think sounding excited about the position and like genuinely interested is one of the best things you can do in a cover letter or a resume. Um, we have one more question, I think. And asked, they said that they are getting like fatigued for writing a lot of cover letters, and like what our recommendations for combating that are.
I think in terms of writing the cover letter, there are definitely parts of it that you do not have to rewrite every single time that you write a cover letter, whether that's you talking about, some of your experience or your academics. I think you tailor it every time. I think, at least for me personally, it's a great tool when a I have a running doc of all of my kind of internship experiences and all of my academic experiences, and I'm able to kind of cut and paste from that running doc to create a new cover letter for each position that I apply for. So there's definitely ways, shortcuts, I guess, of making writing cover letters a little bit easier for yourself, where you're not just kind of creating new information every single time.
Yeah, I agree. I think you should never be, other than your first time, like never have to really start a cover letter from scratch. Like it is at a certain point very formulaic. Like you're kind of talking about the similar things each time. So just keeping that in mind and making sure like you can reuse like really good paragraphs or really good sentences about specific roles or like past projects or anything like that. But yeah, I totally get that. It is super tiring and fatiguing, quite frankly. You just kind of have to keep pushing through and then, yeah, you reuse stuff when you can. And like, yeah, definitely don't start over every time, I say, is my main advice. Okay, awesome. Those are the questions we've gotten for now. Feel free to keep asking them. We love hearing questions. I'm sure if you have a question, other people also have that question. So we're happy to answer them. The next section that we're going to talk about right now is networking. I think it's always prevalent. It's especially prevalent if you're struggling to find internships. If you're just applying to a lot of applications and you're really not hearing a lot back, it might be time to start trying to really use your network and see if you can find positions and get in the door places to get interviews and get those acceptances. So these are kind of like the three P's of networking. But first, like the purpose, learning, building connections, job hunting, gathering information. Even if you cold message someone or cold email someone and all you get is just information from them, that's also awesome. Like, even if it's not going to lead to a job, any information you can get about hiring processes or about jobs or internships is super useful and make sure to always be collecting that information. Second P is people. So it's like, who should you be doing this with? So keep in mind industries that they're in, the role they're in, companies that they're in, levels that they're in, and then people that maybe mimic your background or your journey so that you can connect with them. Really, the role for this is just like, don't cold DM a CEO. Like, know who you should be messaging with. There's people that are going to be more likely to respond than others. I think especially people that are fresh out of college, that have really just like have been with the company a couple of years, something like that, lower on the totem pole, are definitely more likely to respond. Not to say like if you want to message a CEO, message a CEO. I'm sure they'd have awesome information, but also just be realistic with your time and energy because networking can be tiring and taxing, and so you just want to really make sure you're talking to the right people. And then the third thing, process. So that's where can you be networking? So on campus events, a lot of the ones we were talking about earlier, so that you can access through Handshake are great ways to network with professionals. In classes, talk to your peers, see where they've interned in the past, see where they're interning in the future. That's such an awesome resource. Also with your professors are really well connected. They work at USC. They have awesome, past jobs, and they have awesome friends and connections that can probably help you in any professional setting you're in. So if you're in an internship or if you're in another professional setting like that, LinkedIn, obviously, family and friends, cold emailing. If there's a company you're really interested in, like send them an email. Like you never know what's going to happen. It can definitely be more beneficial than you think it would be. And then finally, alumni. I think we pride ourselves on having, the Trojan network. And what is the Trojan network if we're not using it? In my experience, whenever I've cold emailed alumni, they've always been more than happy to talk. And so I'd really recommend, like, if there's a specific organization you're interested in, trying to see if a USC alum works there and then messaging them.
I think it's also incredibly or much more attainable when you're contacting alumni that have graduated within the last few years. So they're, essentially your peer, just a little bit older than you. And like Lila mentioned, they're definitely a little bit more accessible and more reasonable when trying to kind of set up a networking email. And this is a great example of an email here that you could be sending to someone where you're introducing yourself and then establishing how you know each other or what your connection is, and then being incredibly specific about what you're looking to get out of this informational interview. Yeah, and then kind of giving them a very nice thank you for your time. And yeah, so I think this is a great, simple email to be sending.
This is also one I sent like 2 years ago, so like don't read too much into it. But we're gonna go over a format in a second. This is an example of like a LinkedIn cold message, which I know can be kind of scary. But I've gotten some before, and I've been like more than happy to jump on a call with someone for 15 minutes or even just answer their questions over LinkedIn. It's a similar format. It's definitely shorter if you're doing a LinkedIn message because there's really only so many characters you can spend. If you are like really in the trenches and like trying to find internships right now, I'd recommend LinkedIn has a premium trial you can use for a month. That's totally free. And on that, you can then like message basically as many people as you want with it. And so if you're like really trying to network right now, like maybe use that free trial so you can send longer messages and then you have a chance to talk to more people. But very similar format as the email, but just like brief to the point, polite, but also talking about why you're interested and yeah, just being really grateful, but like keeping it short. Like you don't want this to be like paragraphs and paragraphs.
I see we have a question in the chat that someone asked, is it better to message people using LinkedIn Premium or using their emails? Um, That I'm not like I think that either way works. I personally don't have LinkedIn Premium, but I think that, it really depends on, if their email is something that's purposefully hidden and kind of difficult to find, they may not be someone who's looking to receive emails. Um, and in that case, I would be using LinkedIn Premium. But if you have, if you or can easily find their email, if it says contact us, I would say feel free to use that email because you do typically have more characters to work with. So it's really a case by case scenario. And also, if you guys are reading the chat, if you could please sign in through the QR code so we can kind of just keep track of who's here and make sure that we can send all of these resources to you if you need them.
Yeah, I agree with Jess. Um, when I said that, like, by no means do you need LinkedIn Premium. Like, do not spend money you don't have on it. Like, it is seriously not that important. I just mean that like it is a good tool if you haven't used your free trial yet. Yeah, but I agree with Jess. If in their LinkedIn bio they have their email, like in my LinkedIn bio, I have like feel free to chat in my email. So if they have that, like feel free to email them. But yeah, you're right. Like if you're digging for that email, maybe it means they don't want to get emails, and then you can just LinkedIn message them anyway. Okay, so now we're going to move on to something we mentioned at the beginning, but an internship tracker. I highly, highly, highly recommend doing this. I think it's really, really easy, especially when you're applying to a lot of internships or a lot of jobs, to just kind of like forget what you've applied for and like stuff falls through the cracks. You don't know when to send follow-up emails. And if you've interviewed, like you're forgetting what to send it to. And so having an internship tracker, even if it's like super informal, is a really good way to like keep track of everything that you've applied for. So this is one I had. It's really badly made actually, but like company name, deadline, the link to the posting, and then like if you've applied or not, and then if you've heard back, like what stage of the process you're in. It just gives a really good guide on like when to be able to follow up for things.
So now we're segueing kind of into interviewing. And once you get to this round, I think you should be prepared to answer the following questions, which are very simple. Why you? Why this company or slash organization? Why this role? And then an example of personal growth or just kind of a positive impact you've had in a past work experience. And these are questions that you're going to see in probably any round, any and every interview round that are really direct and you can tailor them to the position as well and kind of just keep a backlog of all of the experience and whether that's professional or academic.
Yeah, whenever you going into an interview, you want to make sure that you're like super prepared for it. You've gotten that far, you've already done all of the hard parts. Like you want to show off, you want to show your personality and show that you're a good fit for this role. So this is how I prep for interviews. Like obviously do research on the company, the organization, the position. Like you want to make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. And then you also want to be able to answer these questions about your specific relationship to this role and position. And then this is continued, but this is, I think, the question that I've gotten the most questions and comments about. It's like the tell me about yourself question. A lot of times, this will be interviewers' first question. But like, obviously, they'll be like, "Hi, how are you doing today?" Whatever, and then the first question is a lot of times, "Tell me about yourself." And I think it's a really hard question for people to answer because you don't really know how long to talk for. You don't know if they've read your resume, and it's just kind of like I think it's really easy to either ramble or say way too little. And like, I totally get that. I've totally been there in interviews where I'm just like don't really know what to say. So our recommendation is to prepare basically like an elevator style pitch. So it's like a 1 to 2 minute spiel about you that you can cater to whatever specific position you're applying for. And then there's just a couple of things you want to include in there. So you want to mention like name, year, major, minor, area of academic interest, and then any recent experience. So if you're currently interning in a role or if you've recently interned in a role, you want to mention that there, and then why you're interested, excited about the position, and like why you align with it. And then a thank you. I always like to end it with like, thank you so much. I'm so excited to learn more about this position, or like, thank you so much for taking your time out of your day to do this. Can't wait to continue the conversation. And then just kind of a reminder for this that like you'll have the rest of the interview to talk about your resume and talk about other things. So don't feel like you need to fit everything you have to say about yourself in those 2 minutes. Like there will be other chances to talk about things. But yeah, that's just kind of our tip on answering that question.
This is also a great space to kind of interweave some of the qualities that they're looking for that they
Mhm.
talk about in the job description, whether that's, a hard worker, someone who's works well in a fast-paced environment, things like that, that I think you can very kind of casually mention about yourself and your goals in terms of the career environment that you're looking to be a part of. So now in terms of interviewing. So how do you answer all these questions? First, you want to review the job descriptions right before the interview, especially like I mentioned, the qualifications and the tasks that you would complete as an intern to make sure that you're then highlighting all of these skills and qualities that the interviewer has already expressed they're looking for. So you make sure that you have those buzzwords and whether that's something quantifiable or it's just past experience that you've had, you want to make sure that you're highlighting it. And additionally, some jobs will also have tabs on their website about the hiring process or what they're looking for in an applicant. So I think by coming in absolutely prepared in technical skills, emotional intelligence, like whatever these different aspects are that they're looking for, making sure that you're coming in with it and seeming the most prepared that you could possibly be to make yourself stand out from all of the other applicants who are saying, talking about similar experiences to prove why your experiences and why you as a candidate are the best for the role.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really like this is really your time to make the biggest impact. Like it's time to personally connect with a person. Like you want to make sure that like there's a good, healthy conversation going. So you really want to be prepared to answer any question that's thrown at you. I just got another question. How do you make your application answers interesting, unconventional enough to stick out, but not look weird in order to get an interview?
I think, well, I guess I have the question back. I'm not sure if this is referring to when you're still writing your cover letter, how to make yourself stand out to get the interview, or if it's within the interview.
I
Um,
think it's to get an interview. So like I guess application question.
I mean, I would say, I mean, please don't lie. That's the biggest thing. You don't want
Yeah.
to fabricate anything. Be honest about the experience you've had. And I think it's really just important to be honest and kind of explain even the subtle things that you did, even if you felt like the work that you did wasn't that, I worked at Target all throughout high school. So when I was a freshman and a sophomore and I was applying to jobs, I was highlighting the skills that I had acquired at Target. And, you wouldn't think traditionally that working as a cashier at Target is, a really great position, but it's honestly, you can still pull small moments that you made an impact on people and highlight those experiences because at the end of the day, even though other people might have similar positions to you, they're not you. So they, won't have the same take on the role that you do.
Yeah, I agree. Hard agree on the don't make things up. I feel like it always come back to bite you and it's almost never worth it. I think in terms of making interesting answers interesting, I feel like you can make anything interesting if you try hard enough. It's just kind of the fine line of making it interesting but not unprofessional. I think you can really put a spin on most things and like you'll never know what sticks out to employers. Like all the employers going to have different interests and stuff like that. So they'll probably connect with different parts of your resume. So I wouldn't stress too much about if you're like honest answers don't if you don't think they sound interesting enough. Like I think just be honest and be authentically yourself. And that'll work for you. They had a follow-up question. Do you have any examples of things you have used?
I
Do you
think I'm
mean
still,
in interviews or in
yeah.
applications? Sorry, not to that.
I mean, I
In
can
terms
say,
of application answers.
oh, in terms of application, I feel like typically I would save my interesting stories or quips about the roles I've had for the interviews,
Mhm.
and more so in the cover letters. I'm talking just in general about the skills that I've acquired and the things that I've done. Um, yeah, I don't know, Lila, do you have any?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I feel like I save any like narrative stories really for an interview just because there's not much space on a resume or a cover letter for that. I think if anything for that, like if I have like a personal connection to like the mission or the cause or whatever the organization's goal is, sometimes they'll share that in like a sentence or two, and just be like, yeah, I can't even think of really an example for that, but yeah, I think that that's kind of the only time in an application answer I would be thinking of that. I don't know. I haven't had a job application where I've had to answer questions in a while. It's really been very like resume cover letter for the first round. But yeah, I think just like stick to honesty and like I think you're always more interesting than you think you are. Yeah. Okay, awesome. And then I had one other question. They said for underclassmen, what do we do if we haven't had that much job experience?
Like I said, when I was first applying as, freshman and sophomore, the only thing I had done was work at Target. And whether or not you have prior job experience, I think this is a great space to highlight really anything you've done, whether that's academically, whether it's volunteer, even if it's stuff from high school. You can put your high school clubs and activities when you're still a freshman or a sophomore in college on your resume. Um, and once again, just pulling, whether it's small or big, pulling from the experiences that you've done, because at the end of the day, no matter what the role or the experience was, you are providing some sort of actionable impact, even if it's something as small as ringing, groceries up at the cash register. So I think just kind of thinking about all the things that you've done and trying to pull the best things from from your experiences, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I also think like that's a really good time to pull from like things you've done in class. Like you've been in college for at least a semester now. Like if you've done class projects or if you've learned skills in class, like you can totally talk about that kind of thing. And then yeah, also definitely highlight high school experiences. You can highlight non-traditional experiences. I told you I worked at a restaurant for like all 4 years of high school, and I sophomore year I had like that customer service really highlighted on my resume. And that actually my interviewer for my Senate internship asked specifically about that because they were like, you're gonna have to work directly with constituents. Like we like seeing that you have customer service experience and can handle those types of conversations. And so that is like a non-traditional experience or like a non-internship experience that was actually really helpful for getting me an internship. So I think like don't doubt that those experiences are just as valid, even if they're not as like traditional or what is like considered like a good internship to put on a resume. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for the question. Feel free to keep asking them. We're going to keep moving. We're going to go to.
Yeah, so here we're going to talk a little bit about a method that you can use when storytelling and kind of telling, answering all of these questions that we talked about. And I can tell you that this method, the STAR method, is actually applicable to even beyond interviewing. I think in this day and age, a lot of people have trouble talking about themselves or in general, just kind of getting a point across. And the STAR method is great for kind of breaking down the information and telling it in the best manner possible. So first we have a situation where you're providing context and background for, what you're about to talk about. Then task, where you're describing the problem or the challenge and being specific about what you had to do at hand. And then the action is where you can explain what you did and how you did it using actionable, using deliverables, specifics that you're using. And then finally, the results, where you're talking about the benefits, the savings, rewards, etc., where you're using numbers or you're showing specifics about the impact that you had. And overall, I think this is a great way of breaking down your, whether it's a bullet point in a resume, whether that's the story you're telling in answering a question for an interview. It's just a great storytelling method that shows you came prepared.
Yeah, I agree. It's really important that if they ask you a question that like would lead to like a narrative or storytelling answer, that you're telling a full, concise story and you're not just like rambling on like there's this time I did this and then it kind of ends without a point. Like you want to make sure it has a really concise circle. And so that's kind of goes back to one of the things we said earlier, but like not like prepping stories, but like putting a couple in your back pocket that you know are good stories and that are applicable to a lot of things. So like a time you worked on a class project or a big thing that you did for your internship or something like that. It's good to like think about those things so you're not put on the spot and like have nothing to say. Just because that can make sure that like the stories you're telling are really impactful and they're not just like kind of filler for the interview. Okay. And then this is kind of our last big point for interviewing. But always ask questions at the end of an interview. There will always be times too. That is always going to be your interviewer's last thing they say. They're going to say, do you have any questions? So you want to make sure you always have something to say when they say that. Our rule of thumb is to always prepare at least 3 questions to have so that when they ask you, you're not just like stumbling and have nothing to say. If during the interview a question comes up, ask that question instead. Like that can be super applicable and like you should get that question answered. But if nothing comes up, it's good to have questions to prove that you're interested and solidifies that you like are clearly interested and have intent with this job. And then the last big thing for questions is you want to ask questions that can't easily be found online and are, if possible, personal to the person speaking to you. So you don't want to be like, and what's your company's mission? And it's like, well, you can Google that. Like they're taking time out of your day to interview you. So you want to make sure that you're asking insightful questions. They don't have to be like amazing, like the best ever questions, but they should just be thoughtful and well-intentioned, I think.
Yeah, so here are some examples of, questions that you can use. What are the current goals that the company is focused on, and how does X position work on supporting these goals? What are the learning and professional development opportunities I would have in this role? What do you think are the most important qualities for someone to excel in this role? In general, all of these questions are really just highlighting the company culture and how you would fit into that. So it's something like Lila mentioned that's not general, and you can find that kind of information online without being able to ask it first.
One of my favorite things to ask is to ask questions specifically about their role or their experience working with this company. That gets them to open up about themselves, which is probably hasn't happened yet throughout the interview. And it really, I think, helps build a connection between interviewer and interviewee, and really like helps that dynamic. It's also helpful if you're when you're sending your follow-up email, which you should send after every interview. Um, you should always send like a brief follow-up email thanking them for their time. And then it's always nice to mention a specific from the interview. And so whatever question you ask, like you can be like, I really enjoyed talking about whatever we asked, or like, thank you for answering my question on X, Y, and Z. And it just kind of jumpstarts the memory, reminds the interviewer who you were and what you guys talked about, and that it was a fruitful conversation.
It,
This is, oh,
no, you can go.
you go.
Yeah, it's always a best practice after an interview to make sure that you're following up post-interview by sending a short, specific thank you note, referencing something that you guys talked about, whether, it was the question that you asked or something that you found incredibly exciting to learn about. Please do this within the first like 24 hours of your interview. I usually like to do it within the first like 4 to 5, just to, within the work day that they'll be in office, they're checking your email. And it's again just to keep you kind of in the forefront of their mind as an applicant and making them remember what you talked about and what made you stand out.
Yeah. I got a question in the chat. They said after you interview and send your follow-up, uh, at what time frame, if you haven't heard a response back, should you resend a follow-up?
I would say this is again like a case by case scenario, maybe a couple weeks maybe or days. I think it really just depends, if you're applying to something at a giant company or firm, it's more likely you can expect to be ghosted. Unfortunately, that's just kind of how it goes. But if it's a smaller company, you've engaged with the employers, you know that they are typically quick responders. I would say then give it a couple, maybe a week or so, and then respond back. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the same thing. I would say at least a week minimum. But if in that like second, third week you haven't heard anything, I think it's totally fair to be like, send something that's just like, hi, I just wanted to follow up on this email. I was wondering if I could send you any additional documents or things like about myself as an applicant. And I was wondering if there are any updates in the hiring process. So super informal. Don't just like be like, any updates? Like you want it to still be a nice, like thought out email when you're sending that kind of thing. But I think that's totally fine to do and it's professional and it just reiterates your interest in the position. So I don't think it's ever a bad thing to do. Um, yeah, I think that's my thought on it. But yeah, I totally get that. I feel like nowadays we're getting a lot of companies that are just ghosting people, which sucks. So I think send that follow-up email. You never know what might happen. I also wanted to say send follow-up emails if you do like networking calls or anything like that. Like you always want to make sure you're like this kind of format stands the same. Like if you cold DM someone on LinkedIn and then chat with them, like make sure you're sending a follow-up thank you to them as well. Just it's a good habit to do for anything that for anyone who's taking time out of their day to talk to you about things.
Yeah, I honestly think above and beyond it just being something that helps you stand out as an applicant, it is now kind of a common courtesy. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily gonna like hurt you if you don't send it, but it won't help. So I would recommend highly sending a follow-up interview. I mean a follow-up email after interviews, networking calls, any sort of call of that nature.
I got another question in the chat. They said, what do you send in a follow-up email if you don't remember any specifics from the conversation?
I think if you don't have anything specific to mention, you could always just say thank you so much for talking to me about XYZ position I really enjoyed learning about. And then you could always pull from the job description because those are things that you would have like hit in the conversation. So, yeah, I mean, if you can't be incredibly specific, I think being as specific as you can towards the general state of the conversation is always kind of a great little way to tailor it.
Yeah, I agree. I also think like I've said it before, but like I don't think it's necessarily the content of the email that matters. I think it's just the fact that you're sending the message and like thanking them. Like I don't think the content is going to make or break your application really ever. So I wouldn't stress too much about that. I think just it's the nature of being polite that you're doing it that sort of matters more. Um, I got another question. And they said, do you send follow-up emails to rejection?
I personally don't. I think also a lot of those come from like auto replies or the email will say no reply to it. I think if you like maybe interacted with this HR individual a lot of times and you just want to say, thank you for your consideration, very brief and short, I would say no harm in that case, but especially if it says no reply in the email, I would recommend not replying.
Yeah, I agree. If it seems like it's like a very general message or it says like a lot of times it'll be like this email box is like not checked, like don't reply to it, definitely don't send one. But if it is, if it seems personal or if it seems at least directly from the hiring manager or someone you talk to in an interview, I actually do send follow-ups to rejections. I think it's nice best practice. I think you can still appreciate your time and you can still be like, I really enjoyed the process and learning about your company. And then if I am sending one, a lot of times I'll end it with like, if there's any open positions in the future, I'd love to be considered for them. Just because you never know what can happen. A lot of times, like maybe they hire someone else and they don't work out, and then they're going to go to their second best candidate. Maybe that's you. So it's always, I think, good to end on a positive note if you can. But yeah, if it's like a mass rejection email, I wouldn't respond to that. If it's personal or from someone you've talking to directly, I would.
Yeah, additionally, I think like if you have, if you know them personally, it's a personal response, I would definitely say this could be a place where you could ask for feedback on your interview or on your resume or maybe just in general tips. And that's something they may not always respond to. They have no obligation to give you any feedback whatsoever. But if that's something you're, really looking for, especially if you're new to the application process, I would say no harm in, just seeing if they have any ways for you to improve.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Um, awesome. I think those are the questions for now. Um, which takes us to our Q&A portion, which is perfect. I know we don't have too much time left, so I'm just going to jump to resources really quick, and then we'll go back to the Q&A, but feel free to ask questions in the chat while we're covering resources. We just want to make sure we get these to you before the time ends. So some awesome resources USC provides. So on Handshake, there's tons of stuff. I know I talked about the Career Center tab before, but they have a specific page for resources. Both the USC Career Center and then whatever school you're in will often have their own Career Center. So they'll have customized, like I know I'm in Price and we have like resume guides, cover letter guides, interviewing guides, all that kind of stuff. So it's awesome to look through that. In addition, BMOC, ISSUU, and writing labs are all awesome things to work on with cover letters and resumes. We did a whole presentation about that recently. So if you have any questions, we're happy to talk about it. But BMOC is basically, this is good AI actually, which we were talking about. It's an AI platform that can help you format and write cover letters and resumes, and it'll score yours and basically tell you if it's good or not. And so super awesome tools to use that you have free access to as a USC student. And then finally, Jess, if you want to introduce office hours.
Yeah, so like we mentioned, we work at the Career Center. So if you have any specific questions or you want a one-on-one with us, we are available to do those. Our office hours for myself is 1:30 to 4:30 on Tuesdays, and for Lila, it's Mondays and Wednesdays, 11 to 1. If none of these times or days do work for you, please feel free to email us and we could set something up or we can directly correspond with you via email. But please do reach out if you have any more questions or anything, whether that has to do with this presentation or our past experiences. We would love to kind of give you any advice that we can.
Yeah, we're also super happy to look over resumes, cover letters, prepare you for interviews, anything like that. Like we understand how frustrating and draining this process is. Like we've been through it before and had good results. So we're more than happy to assist you guys in any way we can. Yeah, so feel free to reach out to us. We're super happy to talk about that. If you're interested in our office hours, they are on Handshake. And if you go to Career Center and then there are these appointments, we're under the Industry Insiders tab. And if you have any trouble finding that, just send us an email and we can set up appointments ourselves or help you find that. But yeah, um, in addition, we just wanted to plug one last thing. Um, the Career Center is doing this awesome thing called Career Track. And so basically, a group of students gets to go to a specific place. In this case, we're promoting the arts, education, nonprofit, and social justice track right now. And I believe they're going to inner city arts. And oh, perfect. Lauren just dropped the details in the chat. But it's super awesome opportunity to go talk directly to an employer and talk directly to people who work there. You can learn about all of the internships they offer. It's a super awesome experience. I'm going on one tomorrow, specifically in the policy field for Justice Corps that I'm super excited for. So it should be a super cool experience. So definitely apply to that if you have availability and are interested in that kind of thing. We have 4 minutes left. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them now. If not, thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate it. We're happy to send slides and Zoom recordings to anyone who's interested. Just shoot me and Jess an email and we can send that your way.
Also, if you haven't yet, please do scan the QR code that's in the comments just to make sure that we check all of you guys in and have your contact information for, if there's any more correspondence that's needed. Yeah, but please do send your questions for these last few minutes if you have any.
If we have scanned all three of the QR codes, are we good to go on attendance?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great. Awesome. Thank you.
So we don't have to like fill out like the TEP like form.
What's the
Um,
TEP for?
Oh, sorry. Just for athletics, is this gonna go like through like are we gonna be put on a list or should we just like manually? Sorry, I don't know if I'm like talking about something you guys understand.
No, you're so good. Um, I'm not sure what you're referring to. But if you scan the code, that should have been attendance. And then if any,
Okay.
and then yeah, we'll have your names and stuff if anyone reaches out to us for that.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Someone messaged, how do I find the announcement if there's a new visit for Industry Trek? So announcements for that will come from the Career Center. They'll usually email everyone, so it should already be in your email. But you can go to the Career Center page on Handshake or the Career Center page just on Google, and if you look up USC Career Center, you should be able to find that. I just remembered them.
Yeah, I'm gonna finish the recording.